All right, greetings everyone, and welcome to our event called Ministry Through Trauma, Wisdom for and from Catholic Sisters. As we begin, as I said, you are most welcome to type into the chat box and let us know where you're from, where you're joining us from today. Our panelists will, of course, get longer introductions, but we love seeing where our other participants, our attendees are from as well. I'll offer a brief introduction to the event and then introduce our panelists before we get started. This event is sponsored by the Loyola Institute for Ministry, or LIM, at Loyola University, New Orleans. LIM offers degrees and certificates in theology, ministry, and religious education right here in New Orleans and to students around the world. And this webinar is part of LIM's project, Flourishing Sisterhood, Nourishing Communities in the Gulf South, which is supported by a grant from the Conrad and Hilton Foundation's Catholic Sisters Initiative. My name is Sarah DeMarais, and I work at LIM and manage the Flourishing Sisterhood project. I'm now going to go ahead and add some links into the chat. Let me see. Okay, so I've linked LIM's website for anyone interested in learning more about other events or opportunities to study with the Loyola Institute for Ministry, and also a link to our Flourishing Sisterhood project website. So while recognizing that we have participants on this call who are not Catholic sisters or are not located near New Orleans, and you're all most welcome to be here, I do want to take a moment to highlight some opportunities available through our project to Catholic sisters in the Gulf South region. First, we right now are trying to hire a graduate assistant to work with us on this project. So we're looking to hire a Catholic sister who would work part-time on this project to promote sisters' well-being and would be able to earn one of our graduate degrees in either pastoral studies or religious education for free. So the scholarship would be attached to the position. So we're really excited to offer this and are hopeful we'll find a sister who's a great fit for this position. So whether that's you or if you can think of someone, feel free to be in touch. Secondly, we are now recruiting sisters throughout the Gulf South to participate in some spirituality and learning communities. So we'll have communities of sisters who will gather either in person or on Zoom for fellowship and formation to study spirituality and aging. So I'm trying to keep it brief, but there's a lot more to say about that. So if you want more information about either the study opportunity or the graduate assistantship, you can follow that link that I put in the chat to our project website. And if you're interested particularly in a spirituality group, there is a form that you can find on that website to give us your contact information. So I definitely encourage you to fill that out so we can follow up with you and see what questions. So you're also welcome to email me if you have any questions. And again, my contact information is on that same project website that I linked. Okay, so that's the introduction, and turning now to tonight's event. I am so thrilled to welcome these three fabulous panelists who are going to be sharing with us their wisdom about ministering to communities that have experienced trauma. A note about our format tonight: we're going to hear from each panelist, and then at the end we'll have a question and answer session with all the panelists together. So you are welcome to submit questions for the panelists using Zoom's Q&A function. You can submit them at any point, and we'll visit them together during the Q&A session after the individual presentations. Okay, so now our presenters. Our first presenter, and I'll introduce all three and then we'll hear from them one at a time, is Dr. Cirecie West-Olatunji. Dr. West-Olatunji is the Melba Fortuné Martinez Endowed Professor in the Counselor Education Program and the Director of the Center for Equity, Justice, and the Human Spirit at Xavier University of Louisiana. She is a past president of the American Counseling Association and the Association for Multicultural Counseling and Development, and she has served as editor-in-chief of the Journal of Multicultural Counseling and Development. Dr. West-Olatunji has initiated several clinical research projects that focus on culture-centered community collaborations designed to address issues rooted in systemic oppression, such as transgenerational trauma and traumatic stress. Next, we will hear from Sister Miriam MacLean. Sister Miriam is a member of the Religious Sisters of Mercy of Alma, Michigan. She holds a master's degree in social work from the Catholic University of America and a doctorate in social work from Michigan State University. Sister Miriam is a licensed clinical social worker and currently serves as the director of Catholic Charities of Southwest Louisiana. And finally, we will hear from Sister Mary Lou Aldape, who is a Teresian sister raised in San Antonio, Texas. She has served in San Antonio, Uvalde, Miami, and New Orleans. She has taught in the classroom for 20 years and served in leadership roles for 19 years. She holds a BA in education with minors in chemistry and math, a master in curriculum and instruction with specializations in science education and leadership, and a degree of education specialist in administrator leadership for teaching and learning. Currently, Sister Mary Lou serves as a librarian and technology coordinator at Sacred Heart Catholic School in Uvalde, Texas. Thank you so much for our distinguished panelists. Those bios were very long and could have been much longer for each of you. So thank you so much for being here tonight and for sharing your experiences and your expertise with us. And we will turn now to our first presenter, Dr. West-Olatunji.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it. And I too am very honored to be part of this panel. And I think I was invited because I do a lot of work and research around disasters, and particularly disasters within minoritized communities. So I've been given really specific instructions of things I need to cover. And so I do want to share a little bit. I'm not going to lecture, but I did want to just talk a little bit about, what is trauma? When we talk about trauma, what do we mean? Mostly people are familiar with post-traumatic stress disorder. We've heard that on TV, movies, internet, and so on. And typically post-traumatic stress disorder, it involves some kind of personal experience, a perceived or actual threat. And then typically a person experiencing that has fear, helplessness, or even terror as a response. There's often a cognitive element to it where an individual might feel or behave in a disoriented or disorganized, agitated behavior. And then we talk about hyperarousal intrusion or constriction, where hyperarousal means that people are easily startled, intrusion, typically nightmares, and constriction, usually emotional shutting down. When we think about the types of trauma, there's definitely, interpersonal violence, natural disasters like hurricanes, floods, fires, and so on. Sexual abuse, like sex trafficking, for example, child sexual abuse, and so on. Transportation accidents, bus, car, airplane, and so on. Fire and burns, community violence, suicide, and then, of course, medical conditions like an epidemic that we're in right now. And of course, I always like to talk about compassion fatigue, and I really want to emphasize that tonight because a lot of times those of us who are providing services often experience secondary trauma. And so I want to make sure that those of you who are providing those services are well. You heard Sarah talk about systemic oppression and the research that I do. And that research is really built on the supposition that how individuals cope with trauma is dependent upon their social positioning prior to the onset of those traumatic experiences. So I know when we think about what kinds of circumstances people had before COVID-19, for example, were people dealing with pre-existing health conditions? Were they dealing with pre-existing mental health conditions? And then with COVID, we tend to get the additive effect. So it becomes multi-layered. And so even though people might experience the same kind of trauma, they will have differential outcomes. And then we think like whole groups of people. So thinking about people who are culturally or socially marginalized, people who live in impoverished neighborhoods, the elderly, people who are culturally diverse, people who have mental or physical impairments, are all disproportionately impacted by traumatic events. And sometimes those things are based upon historical biases or institutionalized biases in society. I often talk about transgenerational trauma as well, where we have trauma that is experienced over generations, and then there isn't this direct exposure that I mentioned at the very beginning. And so there's been a lot of recent research that provides us with evidence of transgenerational, or sometimes you hear people call it intergenerational trauma. This research was started really in investigating the Jewish Holocaust, where behavioral scientists were wondering why the children and grandchildren of individuals who experienced the horrors of World War II, why is it that their offspring also had similar trauma symptoms? And then we began to take a look at this issue of transgenerational trauma. Today, we have research that provides us with information for Native American indigenous populations, African American and Black populations, Asian, and so on. So we can take a look at how over generations, we see some of those symptoms like depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, substance abuse, and interpersonal violence. I do want to say, as we talk about transgenerational trauma, we should also talk about transgenerational resilience. And we see, despite many of the systemic factors that influence minoritized communities, that we still see them here, and they're able to contribute, and they have ways of coping. It's known as adaptive coping, that they pass on in generations as well. And so when we are providing services, we don't want to objectify people, and we want to certainly emphasize their strengths and use a strength-based approach in working with them. So when we think about resilience, we understand that intergenerational factors can either hinder or help with the resilience. We also understand that individual and family factors play a part in this. So there could be family stressors. And again, when we think about a major disaster, such as a hurricane, or there could be malfeasance involved. In other words, there could be, human factors involved in it. And so we think about what were people doing, what were their circumstances prior to that, to really understand how they're impacted. And so we understand that there are risk factors and there are also protective factors that we need to consider. And a lot of those coping mechanisms are often culturally based. And so we need to ask individuals and families to define what healthy functioning might look like within their own context. When you think about the kind of interventions, I'm sure you all are using these, so I'm just going to review them. There is the need for deep listening, so not just surface listening, but really settling in and listening from one human being to another to really hear what people are saying and sharing. It's important that also, as part of evidence-based interventions, we need to think about social action. There's been a lot in discussions in the behavioral sciences about social justice or social action in psychotherapy and in counseling. And so we want to begin to incorporate taking social action in the work that we do, and you're probably already doing that. Again, I want to emphasize strength-based cultural practices. But in general, the idea is to take an epistemic social justice perspective where we're really addressing the multitude of issues that may be impacting the people that we serve. So we want to think about that. So in the end, it's important to think about the cost of caring, what we call compassion fatigue. And it can be debilitating for us who provide services. And it makes us less effective in the work that we do. So it's important that we think about that and that we try to prevent compassion fatigue. So when we think about being deployed to a disaster impacted area, it's important that we start off by thinking, okay, what am I going to do to take care of myself? How can I monitor the self-care of my peers? So that becomes paramount. Self-care is the most important factor that is important for you to protect yourself. And when we talk about self-care, we're really not talking about some of the more fleeting kinds of things that we can do. We now can look at neuroscience in counseling to understand that we can actually do some things to rewire our brains. So what we want is what I call enduring self-care. And so we want to think about what some of those strategies might be. So we know some of the temporary things that we do might be to take a bubble bath, listen to our favorite music, go for a walk or a run. Things like that are good, but they tend to be temporary. If we really want to help ourselves to rejuvenate, we need to think about enduring self-care. And so that would include learning to do deep breathing exercises, to learn how to do body scans, and definitely thinking about other forms of mindfulness, thinking about meditation or yoga. Those are things that we know help us to really rewire the way in which the brain operates. And so we want to think about that in terms of self-care. Finally, in thinking about professional strategies, it's important that, when we are working in these disaster-affected areas, it's important for us to stay open in our discussion about the stressors that we're experiencing. So we need to talk to other team members. We need to talk to our supervisors. We definitely need to share. And this really is designed to help normalize the problem and foster a sense of community and interdependence, not independence. You can't do it all by yourself. So interdependence, so that you don't feel isolated or overstressed. And that's likely to happen if you experience compassion fatigue, that sense of isolation that can lead to irritability, depression. It can impact your ability to empathize and so on. And then you also experience fatigue. It's also important to develop a support system of peers. So you want to think as soon as you get to an area, or as you're working with disaster affected individuals, is to already have that short list. Who can you call? Who do you have on speed dial, right? When you begin to feel something, you don't feel like yourself. Again, early sign is fatigue. You no longer have the excitement of going out and working with people. Finally, my last professional strategy is it's important to debrief. So typically when you're working in deployed areas, you want to debrief daily at the very least. Sometimes you might want to debrief in little pockets throughout the day, but definitely you want to really take a moment and think about what happened that day and how you were impacted by it. Definitely, if you're in a circumstance where you actually get to leave the disaster affected area and go back home, you definitely need to set up some debriefing sessions with your peers and your colleagues back home. Try not to use family members, but definitely think about who you can go to, who really knows you, who knows what you do, and understands your work. And they're willing to sit down and allow you to process about what happens. While you're deployed, it's important that you take regular breaks and think about mental health days and think about, okay, you may feel guilty for a little bit that you're not out there doing the work, but you do need to recharge. Everybody needs the opportunity to recharge. And so it's important that you take those mental health breaks either throughout the day or a whole day if necessary. I will just offer, I think I have a minute to do that. I will offer that some disclosure. I was not in New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina hit. I had raised my children and everything, and we left and went to Florida actually. And then I was deployed by SAMHSA and I came back. And I remember being a part of a team for 2 weeks. I remember one day waking up and joining the team to start the day. And the clinical supervisor said, "Oh, you're going to take the day off." And I said, "What? I have a lot of stuff to do. I have a list of things. I've been working with people, I have things to do." And she said, "Not today. You're not going to do those things today." So she told me to turn around and go back to my hotel room and take the day off. And at first, for the first couple of weeks, I brooded because I was angry. I couldn't believe that, I couldn't do my work. I was on a roll. But after a while, I calmed down, settled down, and I started thinking about it. And I realized I had been experiencing irritability and fatigue and so on. And then I really settled into it and was able to take that break, that mental break, and came back the next day. And I was my usual self. And I processed with my peers. I was an interdisciplinary team. There was a psychiatrist, a nurse, social worker, a psychologist, I was a counselor. And they said, "No, we saw it on your face. You were not your usual self. And we see that you're back." So it's real important to have clinical supervisors or just work supervisors who know you and they know when you're at your limit. And so that's important. It's important to have peers who care about you, who are going to pull your coat and say, "Hey, I think you need to relax." And of course, we all need to become much more self-aware so we know when our ability to empathize has been compromised. So with that, I will pass this off to Sister Miriam.
Hello, thank you. I think that is, and hopefully I'll be able to tie some of this together in terms of ours here in Lake Charles, Louisiana. As said, I'm the director of Catholic Charities there, and we've experienced several natural disasters. Of course, we've experienced the pandemic, and then we had a Category 4 Hurricane Laura in August of 2020, and which was at that time the strongest to hit. Yes, also Hurricane Ida joined thereafter. Another hurricane, a Category 2 hurricane, and then winter freeze, which impacted us kind of extra because our infrastructure had already been, especially from Hurricane Laura, and many homes damaged, but also our water system was damaged. So we extra kind of difficulty dealing with that. And that Mesa, Lake Charles experienced 17 inches of water in less than rain, less than 12 hours. And so we had have the experience of compounding disaster area. You see a sense of we can do this, and we are a community, and the impact of disaster on things like group ready and kind of bonding as a community to do things. But so with any disaster, the fatigue, but time after time after time, the fatigue kind of increases, not just in individuals, but in the whole system, right? Like that everyone is more, maybe not at their best. That as that story at the beginning, I don't think we've heard it, but like it is to have people still, 2 years later, still in trails, or people, our schools, 3 of our schools destroyed, that they're still in trailers, and now those trailers are starting to fall apart. And so added difficulties there. So at Catholic Charities, we responded to these disasters primarily, I would say, by our presence, and to maintain a consistent presence. All of our needs about tripled after the storm. Continuously, so after the storm, they increased and tripled, but they've remained being triple from our pre-storm date, both in food distribution and then also in like rental assistance. And so the privilege and also the difficulty of being present the day of the storm. The sisters, we evacuated of the storm, but we came back and assessed the day.
Sister Miriam.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We're getting a couple messages that your sound is choppy. I'm not sure. I know it was good before the call, so I'm not sure if your internet connection weakened or if there's any way that you could strengthen your connection now.
My video I could try that.
Sure. Yeah, why don't you try that, and we'll see if we can hear you better with that. And thanks to those who submitted comments saying that it was difficult to hear.
So
Thank you.
Interrupt again if you can't hear me.
Thank you.
So our ministry, being here in those days after the storm and beginning to assess the needs and being present in the community. So surely to be able to give whatever it was we had at the beginning, many supplies and tarps and nails and water, all of that obviously important. We distributed 900 pallets throughout the Southwest Louisiana region after that, with the help of many of the churches. But I think those things were absolutely necessary. We went through our own neighborhood and our own, we live in a poor neighborhood here in Lake Charles, and made sure that our neighbors were okay and they had what they needed, food and water in those days. But then also realizing that it wasn't just the things, it was also the presence of people in the community that cared and that wanted to be there. And I think as we set up distribution sites throughout the diocese, and the second storm came, that our people were fatigued from helping us run those distribution sites. And so we had to be creative and flexible about how we continued in those places, because I felt like it was very important that when people experience these sorts of difficulties, that they not be just left. That's often the experience after disasters is, there's a strong initial response, but then everyone leaves, necessarily so. But being an important part of the community, I felt like we had to maintain a strong presence because obviously the needs have not gone away, and we know that the poor are disproportionately impacted by these disasters. I think some of the things that I learned in this were a need to be flexible and to be creative. I think, when we came in those initial days after the storm, we didn't have electricity in our home. We did have a generator at Catholic Charities, and we didn't have water anywhere, and we didn't have ways to communicate. And so really trying to think outside of the box about how we were going to begin and how we would be present. And so I think one of the ways that was very helpful for that was that people did reach out as they were able, or just come into the disaster area to be able to assist and to be able to articulate our needs. And I think this, for me, was a beautiful experience of, speaking of like the strength-based piece of like the church coming together, that both, first it was our local church that, the local priests, we all sort of assessed like who's here and what can we do. And then gradually people from outside being able to come. I know I was very supported by Sister Marjorie at Catholic Charities in New Orleans and Sister Beth in New Orleans, and being connected to that wider church of resources and people. And then I think also as a religious, it was helpful. I think the vow of obedience really prepares you to say yes to things that you maybe naturally wouldn't want to say yes to, so I think it gives you that way to say like, okay, even though I don't think maybe I can do this, I've had other experiences where I couldn't do something and I worked at it and it worked out. And so I think, as it was said, those experiences before disasters are very helpful in that way. I think another thing that helped us was that, following as we said, like reaching out to those people around us. So as much as I could, I stayed in contact with our Superior General, who, also instructed to follow our regular way of life as much as possible. And so to be able to have mass and to be able to have prayers, and, that those were central to our life and to our being able to be of service. And so just, making use of those regular things that I think we have an extra help to that self-care as religious if we, but we do need the help to be reminded of what a gift that is, but also to go back there. I know even the day of the flood, after we had ripped out our floor and tried to get the water out, it's like, but to go to the chapel and to have holy hour, when that's possible. And we were very blessed that it was possible for us. And I think staying connected to our community and then to the whole church, I think that has been for me a great gift, and feeling the support of so many people to help to realize that while I do have an obligation to be of service, we take a fourth vow of service to the poor, sick, and ignorant, that's not just me, that the Lord is here helping, and he's helping very actively through his people and through the church. So I think that's it for me. I welcome Sister Mary Lou to lead us into the next discussion.
Well, I think that I'm going to kind of share both what Dr. Cirecie and Dr. Miriam have shared in a very recent reality. And I must apologize ahead of time, because still today, I don't know when it's going to hit me. And I laugh because I accept my humanness. But as I share with you, um, I feel like it's what happened that day in Uvalde on May 24th was the unthinkable from for everybody here. And most of us were in denial. And as I look back, I feel that I had to allow the world to stop and to be there. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want this to be a reality. And so it was part of listening to myself and listening to the needs of our community. We were very blessed with Archbishop Gustavo Garcia Siller, who stopped his world and left San Antonio immediately and came to Uvalde. The support of the Archbishop has been pivotal, and it has created a situation in our church that has helped the healing. We have found meaning in his presence, that God is providing for us a way to provide for our church here. Archbishop Gustavo responded with grace and strength, and that also supported. I work at our little school, at Sacred Heart School, and it supported our school and our parish to open our doors to whoever wanted or needed to come, and that was made possible very much through the Archbishop's support and the school office. Our parish hall became, within 2 days, a hub for the counselors to come from San Antonio and also other counselors. But we have a great majority of the population in Uvalde are Christians and Catholics. And what we heard several times, because the public school system offered counseling services also, but they wanted to come to a Catholic counselor, which, it's understandable that they needed to know that someone was listening to them with their faith. So I kind of learned that to allow others to need us. And as a religious, since we're talking about strengthening our network as religious, I have experienced that we were presence of God among our people, flesh and bone, that feel the pain with them. It was not just our words or anything like that. Actually, it was just being there, and our whole bodies are part of the empathy that we share with our people in Uvalde. Facilitating encounters with anyone who needed, just for them to feel that they were not alone. Going to every funeral that was at our church and a few that were in other churches. It made, our presence in Uvalde as a religious very important, and we continue to help in that way. Immediately, as a planner, I right away said, well, we need to look at the long-term opportunities we can provide. And through the Archdiocese, we did have counseling at the parish for several months, almost 5 months. And we continue to have the counseling in the school. We have, with the help of Catholic extensions, we have been able to provide scholarships for students that wanted to come to Sacred Heart that could never afford the school. Catholic Extensions has been, and this is not a commercial, but it almost feels that way. They have been so wonderful in helping us minister here. The first thing that they did was ask us to, we the Charitians, to organize ways that other sisters could be brought to Uvalde to spread that presence of faith and of a consecrated person here journeying with our people. Immediately, our principal responded. He is a man that has that sense of urgency, and we prepared our school, which I think that's very important when it comes to trauma. Be able to provide ways that a person can feel safe again. And so our school was prepared for August 15th with bulletproof panels and a whole new way of dealing with lockdowns and helping our children feel safe again. We have reached out again through the help of Catholic Extensions with activities for the children to experience God's loving presence. And we've had monthly, we started something we call the I Can Camp. We already have a center in Uvalde that provides tutoring for public school children. We have many lower income families that need extra help. So besides working at Sacred Heart School, we have another sister that works at what we call the Henry Osto Family Project. And so through that project, we began a network with the families to provide support. And with Catholic Extensions, we have been able to invite, I think we've had about 30 sisters coming at different times. And it has been, it has been wonderful. We've become a sisterhood, and that brings joy to me. It's a strength that we can be very happy about. As Catholics here in Uvalde, there is a sense of traditional vision of the church, and very much represented by those who have consecrated their life to service and ministry. So it has been very healing. If I were to think, what advice, when I think of the word wisdom, I think, how does God see this? I would think that it's that idea of quality versus quantity. People have showered gifts upon the whole city of Uvalde. And healing is really not about receiving things. And nothing can make what happened on May 24th better. It's kind of like the deepest wounds we have. We know that kind of feeling does not take place from the outside to the inside. It has to be from the inside to the outside. So really what is far more healing is finding ways to bring out the incarnation of Christ, which brought our healing of the world, which continues to bring our healing in the world, and to make that flesh of this pain that our families are going through real by our love, and by honoring the pain and honoring each child. And that love brings a sense of awareness of what we have allowed in this world, a world where an 18-year-old can purchase an instrument of massive destruction. It is an honor for our religious community to offer a building where we provide after-school tutoring. I mentioned that earlier, and it has now become part of the canvas for the murals of several of the children and one of the teachers. These murals portray the gifts of each child that we have lost, and in a way, a continuity of their presence among us. And I wanted to share that with you, although I see it's getting late, but I have a short piece of a video, and I'm going to share that real quickly. It won't take long. And here we go. And let me see if I can enlarge it. Oops, not sure what I did there. Sorry. All right, well, maybe I'll leave.
Sister, I'm not hearing the sound on the video.
Okay, thank you. I forgot to put that.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. I'm gonna have to stop sharing and then do that. Right. Okay. No. Is it I that have to do it or you? Let me see. Okay. Share sound. Okay, there we go.
And rebuilding.
Can you hear it now?
We heard about these
Yes,
murals
yes,
that
thank
were
you.
being painted and on kind of memorializing the victims and like who they were as individuals, and I really wanted to see them. I wanted to see them in person. I wanted to see how this healing is happening in this community, and I wanted to be here. Just driving through here, it's like, it literally looks like Burleson, where I grew up. Our first stop was to meet Abel Ortiz, a Uvalde resident and art professor, who came up with the idea for the mural project. This is such a beautiful, beautiful project that you're doing.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for being here and pay homage and your respect to the victims and the families. I was really honored to paint whoever I would wind up painting.
Yeah.
But I do have connections to Ellie's family, the mural that I painted, and it's right around the corner here.
Oh my gosh.
This is Ellie.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
She was robust, full of life, and every day was special for her.
that is so beautiful. Oh
Thank
my
you.
God, this is.
Thank you. So each mural is going to tell you their story. It's a baseball card design because she won the championship the Saturday before.
Oh,
basketball.
really?
Yeah, that's why I put champion on her.
Oh, I love that.
It's our response to that tragedy that we're going to be defined by. And the murals provide that positive path towards that redefinition of our community and us as individuals.
And what a beautiful way for these family members to get to come and see them like this.
Yes.
In person, they're massive.
Yes, they have to be monumental.
Yeah.
Because the pain is monumental.
Yeah. Oh, wow, I can't imagine. Next, Abel and I went to meet Monica Maldonado, the founder of the art-based nonprofit Mas Cultura, who worked tirelessly organizing this massive project. So you found a bunch of Hispanic artists, right? Latin artists, right?
Knowing that Uvalde is upwards of 82% Hispanic, it definitely was important for me that the artists be Latino.
Sometimes you can't express with words what you can with visuals. And you connect the dots in a sense. You build the life of the child as you explore across the whole mural.
This is Uzziah. There was just a very caring and compassionate kid that really just wanted to make the world a better place. And there's a story about him where he's got this cookie and one of his classmates asks him for a piece of it, and he takes it and he crumbles it up and he shares it with the rest of his class. And when I heard that story, I knew immediately that Rich would have to paint him because Rich is the same way. Eliana Torres.
Beautiful.
She actually was up to be on the All-Star team, and that day that this happened, she would have found out that she had made the All-Star team. Anne-Marie, this medal was given to her by the Girl Scouts. So Anne-Marie dialed 911 while she was in the classroom, trying to save her friends.
Wow.
This is a blank canvas, and our plan is to put all the names here. We will continue efforts of fundraising through the GoFundMe, and this is
And probably money to preserve as well.
Yep, so we're using the money to preserve.
Well, we actually heard that y'all were needing more funds, so we wanted to help y'all. So we're going to give y'all $10,000 just to help out.
Oh my goodness.
Just to help out, like it's the least we can do. It's so important for people to come see this.
That's going to basically complete the project for us.
Oh my
because we're
gosh.
struggling with the funds here at the end. And so that's going to really, you know how happy I am right now.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
yeah,
Thank you so much.
absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
You guys. Okay. Okay. So we have to find ways to inflesh the pain and allow God to heal and take that. Any questions?
Wow. That was a very powerful and moving video and note to end a presentation on. So thank you, Sister Mary Lou, Sister Miriam, Dr. West-Olatunji. Thank you so, so much for your contributions tonight. We do have an open Q&A box here. And I fixed the chat issues we were having earlier. So the chat is also open. We're getting some messages about how powerful the presentations were. So I encourage anyone who has a question for any of our panelists or all of our panelists, please feel free to submit that through the Q&A. And I also want to give our panelists here an opportunity to respond to each other if that you have any reactions or questions for each other in the next, we have about 5 minutes or so to wrap things
Can
up.
I offer a little, if anybody wants to come, we can bring you. If you want to come serve, we're still planning things. We still have funds for that, but it's just been beautiful when the sisters come in. And that's all I can say.
Thank you. Thank you for that invitation.
Yes.
I was so struck by, I think a theme emerged in each of your presentations about embodiment, about this kind of work and care being embodied. And Sister Mary Lou, you offered us some really powerful language there. You talked about enfleshment, flesh and bone, being present in flesh and bone. And you connected that to the incarnation, such a powerful theological reality in our Catholic faith. And Sister Miriam, too, you made so clear the importance of presence in the community, and continued presence, enduring physical presence in a community in need. And Cirecie, I also think, thank you for sharing that, really the personal story of your experience of being told to go home and get some rest. Obviously your body was feeling things and communicating things that you weren't even quite able to articulate at the moment. So each of you gave us such powerful examples of how important our bodies are in this kind of work and ministry, and how we need to care for those and care for each other.
I experienced that like about May the 27th. I realized I was breathing very shallow.
Mm.
I could sense that. And so I needed to start breathing deeply. Sister, yeah. I went to Xavier University before I ministered at Cathedral, and I have so much to be grateful for my time there, although it was short. But I got to meet some wonderful holy people, including oh my God, I just drew a blank. Sister, she's in heaven now. She's servant of God. Oh gosh, my brain just right now.
I'm sorry, I'm wrong.
I think you're breaking up again, Sister Miriam. I'm sorry.
She was a Franciscan sister.
Sister Thea.
Thea Bowman. There you go. I was blessed with her. Of course, she made me cry every single day with her singing.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's a good reminder.
Yes, Sister Catherine, Thea Bowman.
Yeah, each of you also pointed to relationships and community being so important. And I think naming Sister Thea reminds us that in our Catholic community, we also have the benefit of the communion of saints, that we're also supported by the witness of those who came before.
Yes.
It looks like we
It's
do
a
have
good question.
Yeah, we just got a question here from Sue.
Yes.
If you are the only one available to help your family with their needs, how do you achieve self-care? Would anyone like to respond to Sue's
I
question?
let the professionals.
I was gonna say Dr. West-Olatunji. Sounds like a question for you.
Oh, I think any of us could answer that question. Absolutely. Even when you're the only one, you still have to steal away and go to a quiet place. I often tell people that prayer is also meditation, and it's a form of mindfulness. Don't ever think that it's not. It definitely is, and there's lots of research that supports that. So it's not just how we feel in terms of our faith. It's actually been shown to be true. So even with that, so what we know is that we need to vacillate between time with others and time with self. We can do too much of either. So we have to learn to balance those things. And it's definitely necessary. So even when you have the responsibility of caring for others, that it's always important for you to take time for yourself, even if that's just time where you go in a closet somewhere and just pray, and just get to that quiet place, because you need the inner strength, you need the spiritual strength, and you're not going to have that. You're going to deplete it, as a matter of fact, by just serving and serving and serving and serving. You will deplete it and you won't have anything left. And we don't want that. So you heard Sister Mary Lou talk about, her short breath. And, that tells you, you're not breathing or you're not getting enough oxygen to the brain. And so when that happens, you're not making good decisions. It's just, you just get completely out of balance. So it's important to just stop, no matter what. Your family will be all right. Whatever it is that they're dealing with, they'll be dealing with it if you took 5 minutes to go and just meditate and pray. Their problems will be right there waiting for you when you come back. So they'll survive 5 minutes or 10 minutes while you get yourself strengthened spiritually to be able to go back.
Thank you. We're just at the end here. Maybe if there's one more question, if someone has a lingering question, you're welcome to submit that now. I'll also go ahead and invite our panelists. I think this has probably sparked a lot for people who are participating. So if you are willing to share your email addresses or some contact information, if anyone wants to follow up with you, especially, I think we all heard that invitation from Sister Mary Lou. So
Yes.
Panelists, feel free to put your contact information in the chat if that's something that you'd like to share, if you are open to people following up with you. And I will put my own name and contact here.
This is my society, my religious community emails.
All right, and my email is a good resource for anyone who wants to know more about our Flourishing Sisterhood project, for which this was our first public event. And I am so grateful to our panelists for sharing your beautiful wisdom about how we can, better care for one another in these really challenging circumstances, and better care for ourselves as the carers, as the ministers. So we have a note from Sister Beth, who is our fabulous vicar for religious here in the Archdiocese of New Orleans. She just wants us all to know she's so grateful for each of the panelists and so inspired by each of you. Thank you, Sister Beth.
Thank you, Sister Beth, and thank you for still putting me on your list. I get your emails, although this is a different email from the one you have.
Sister Beth, coordinating many things too. I'm so grateful for your support.
Okay, and I'm seeing, it looks like, Mary Lou, it looks like your email address only went to the other panelists, so I'm going to type it again for you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I wasn't paying attention to
send
that.
to everyone for you.
Okay,
Not letting me
thank you.
copy it, but I'm gonna type it. Okay. STJ Teresians. Okay.
And there's a period between the Luisa and Aldape.
I think I got it. Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Well, not seeing any more questions. I'll leave the call open for just one more minute if anyone wants to save those email addresses. And yeah, I think we can let our panelists go. Thank you all again so much for spending
Thank you.
time with us and sharing this evening.
This is wonderful. Thank you.
For having me.